Hey everyone, Ian King here, editor at Smart Profits Daily. And I'm sure you know by now, the world is facing a pandemic of historic proportions. This is probably the biggest crisis we've faced in decades, but I want to tell you something, that when humanity has been faced by world wars or pandemics in previous times, it has accelerated the pace and the adoption of new technology, because we need these innovative solutions to deal with these complex problems we're facing right now. So case in point, if you look back to World War I and World War II, they led to the advancement of aerospace technology and automotive technology that we used to fight the wars, but then we were able to use in everyday life. If you think about the Cold War, DARPA, which is a highly top secret government intelligence agency, came up with the internet, and they were used to allow US computers to communicate, US government computers to communicate with one another. If you think back to more modern times, even the SARS epidemic in China led to the acceleration of e-commerce in that country, because there were stores that had to close down because of the SARS epidemic that they had in 2003. And these stores started selling their goods online, and that led to the growth of e-commerce in China, kind of like what we saw in the United States with Amazon, although we didn't have an epidemic to deal with like SARS was in China. And nowadays, we're seeing new technology just evolve right in front of our eyes because we're trying to fight this pandemic. So for instance, in China, there is an internet e-commerce company that started delivering packages by drone for the first time. And these were basically pharmaceuticals that had to be delivered to a village that the boat access was closed down. So they loaded these pharmaceuticals up on a drone and they carried it over this lake to the village because there was no boat access. Other things that are being used right now are drones to take people's temperatures in China, and also to register people. They scan a QR code on the drone and they can register whether or not they have the coronavirus or not. And lastly, they're using autonomous robots to deliver supplies throughout the hospital. So a doctor or a tech will put the supplies on the robot, and the robot will drive around the hospital and go to the right doctor or right place where these supplies need to be delivered. So we can see this innovation picking up very quickly to deal with this conflict in China. I think we're going to see similar things happen in the United States. But there's one area of technology that is really overlooked right now that is going to play a huge role in the future, and that is blockchain. And there's a couple reasons for this. One, right now, governments are basically at wartime deficits. So every government in the world is spending as much as possible to combat the virus. We saw it in Italy, we're seeing it throughout Europe, and we're going to see it in the United States soon. And what happens is the governments have to print more money to finance these fiscal deficits. And if you think about a way to hedge your risk when the government is debasing or printing lots of money, you buy something like gold. Well, nowadays we have Bitcoin, which is also a digital gold. So investors and citizens in a country that is debasing their currency can get out of their local currency and buy something like Bitcoin, which has no centralized control. It's a decentralized form of money. There's a limited supply of it. There's 21 million Bitcoins that can be produced, and 85% of those have already been issued. On top of that, we have what's called a halving cycle coming sometime in June, where the amount of daily supply issuance is going to be cut in half. So Bitcoin is one technology that can help people who are worried about the government debasement of their own currency. The second technology that blockchain offers is a decentralized database to hold pieces of information with no centralized control. Now, let me explain how that works. In South Korea right now, the government is fighting this pandemic by identifying the individuals who have coronavirus and then tracking their cell phone usage and figuring out where they were or where they visited and those other people they visited as well. So they can help citizens identify hotspots, okay? And Google has all this data currently. The US government could go to Google right now and say, here are the people who are symptomatic with coronavirus. Please turn over all the information of where they went. Now, the libertarian in me says this is crazy. We do not want a government entity to basically reveal where we've been or track who we've met with because they're trying to crack down on this pandemic. But blockchain has a database that can remain pseudonymous. So we know we can track an individual without knowing who they are, and no one has access or no one has centralized control over the information of where they went. So kind of like Bitcoin, where we know how many Bitcoins are outstanding, we know which wallets own Bitcoin, we just don't know who has or who controls those wallets. You could do the same thing for such things as location tracking or health records, and this can be all done in a decentralized manner in which there's no government agency that controls or knows who's sick and who's not. Everyone knows, and we can match up those health records, the people who test positive for coronavirus or show symptoms, with places they've gone without identifying who they are, because that'll allow other people, other healthy people, to know which areas to avoid. And I think this really is crypto's moment, because we're faced with a huge problem that really needs this decentralized database of information that not one person or one government agency controls. So I think in the next couple years, when we get through this crisis, this is going to be a solution that governments actually look to, using blockchain to identify health records of people who are sick, and then using blockchain to kind of identify also where those sick people, without knowing who they are, have been, who they've been in contact with, and then releasing that information to the public so we know how we can keep ourselves and our families safe. That's it for me this week. I hope you all are safe and healthy and taking care of the ones that you love. Talk to you soon. Thank you.